Guys, joining me today on Fire Your Job, Find Your Purpose is Jason Westlake. And Jason and I had a chance to connect. He's in the yoga retreat world. He owns a beautiful property called Tierra De Suenos down in Cahuita, Costa Rica, which is just a beautiful little neck of the woods. If you ever get a chance to go down to Costa Rica, you should definitely check that area out. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Jason, and there's a few, but he has a really unique story, similar a bit to mine, of transformation and kind of finding his purpose in life. So, Jason, I'd love to first just ask you, how did you go from where you were to where you are? Obviously, not the whole scope, but coming out of your background into a really purpose-driven business. Can you give us a little sense of kind of how that shift and how that transition happened for you?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, there's probably a number of steps and evolution points along the way to be able to get down here. But I remember that I had a full scholarship at Arizona State University for civil engineering. I was smart. That's what everyone told me that I was good at math and physics, and that's what I should do, and that I should get a job and get good grades and follow that path. I was a year and a half from graduating, and I was kind of resigned to that's what I was going to do for the next 40 years of my life. And then a friend of mine gave me the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad to read. And I read that book, and it just kind of it just basically undermined every foundation for how I was going to live my professional life. And after that book, I wanted to run my own business. But the problem was that I was absolutely terrified. Really, really terrified. And I was still going to finish the whole engineering thing and go do that and just try to build my business capacity on the side. But I got to this point in college where there was this one class that was just too hard, too much work, it wasn't that it was too hard, it was just more work than I wanted, a hell of a lot of work that I didn't want to do. And it got to the point where I was getting to the night before the first test, and I'm like, oh, okay, I've got to sit down and study for like the next 12 hours. And right at that time, I get this aching pain in my tooth, throbbing to the point where I'm just lying on my bed for the next 6 to 8 hours in pain. I didn't know it at the time, but my tooth was dying. And so I couldn't do anything at that point except just lie in pain. And by the time it was done, basically I didn't have time to study for the test. And so the next day I didn't go in to do the test. And this was the test, like, if you don't pass this, you fail the class. And if you don't pass this one class, I'm not going to get my civil engineering degree. I would have had to retake it all again. And I was like, okay, that was the point. I was like, I went down and I went to the anthropology building to change my major to anthropology. And so I went and did that. And as I was doing that, it was like a bright sunny day in September. And it was so sunny outside, but I had so much fear and darkness and knots in my stomach on the inside. To this day, that was still like one of the darkest, most fearful days of my life to do that, because I was leaving the scholarship. I was leaving the only thing that I was good at, that I knew that I had confidence in. And the idea of going into the business world, I felt like I was going to be delivering pizza or being in fast food for the rest of my life. I really did. And you know what sucked is for the next 2 years, that's exactly what I did, was deliver pizza for the next 2 years. Well, I could have been a freaking civil engineer,
Yeah,
And
I know what that feels like. I mean, my first college iteration was varying degrees of liberal arts, business, psychology. I mean, I kicked around so many different ideas of things that I wanted to do. And then I wasn't making grades. I was just partying. And I came home. I was up in Connecticut. And I mean, it was so boring compared to living, like in and around New York City. And I very similarly came home and, I started working in restaurants, and I was just making enough money to afford to go out and party. You know what I mean? And it was like this just like endless cycle. And it is such an incredible thing to feel that, call it dark night of the soul or whatever, but that moment where you feel like, oh my God, like there's no vision, there's no clear path, you know what I mean? And I did an exercise after I left corporate, and I call it peeling back the onion. And really what I did was I just kind of like dug back the layers of things that I like to do, and then really got down to foundationally what I loved to do, like what turned my soul on, and it really was just like hockey and yoga. And I couldn't really see how hockey was going to be like a thing that I could do, like even professionally, and that was, on the forefront of my brain. And then yoga just felt like that. Hell yeah. So I'm curious if you had that moment of where you kind of just started to peel things back and got to that like joy route before you kind of, took the next step.
Well, for me, it took, let's see, I made that. So I left engineering when I was 23. Pretty much the entire decade of my 20s was the dark night of the soul.
The dark decade of the soul.
Well, I mean, when I wanted to get a business, I got into sales and I was horrible. I was unconfident. I was like the quintessential engineering personality, shy, introverted, didn't like to talk to people, like almost stuttering.
That was another one of my 20-something jobs. I sold coffee makers in like Bed Bath and Beyond. Like I would stand at one of those little things and try to sell people on giving them free coffee. And I wasn't even good at giving people free coffee. So yeah, I get it.
I think I was in like financial services to try to sell that. And there was like 2 or 3 years or 4 years, I don't remember how long, but I went on like hundreds of appointments. Like I did a lot of work and I got better and I learned everything that I needed to do and needed to say. And the clients were good, should have been good clients that fitted the services, should have bought. I went on like 100 appointments. I think I sold 2 products. And one of them, the insurance that I sold, life insurance, got canceled because the next month the guy was going to Mongolia.
Yeah.
I'm like, who goes to Mongolia? Right after.
The guy who apparently doesn't need life insurance anymore.
So I got to this point where I was just so depressed and hopeless and just like overwhelming hopelessness, where I would like look up at the stars at night, and the wonder that I used to feel as a kid was just replaced by like, I'm just going to be stuck in fast food. That's it. I won't have anything. Like I couldn't overcome the immense fear that just overwhelmed me for years. That was so overpowering, even with all the actions that I was taking. I was making small incremental progress. That's why I say for the whole decade of my 20s, I had so much fear and doubt and beliefs about myself that I was worthless and wasn't going to be any good at anything and couldn't do anything. But it wasn't just like a thought. It was like, it was in my bones. It was in my gut. It was like reality, like this, you're a loser. You're not like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, like coming out of the school system, the Western school system, like I got tested for learning disability when I was in middle school, only to find out like I had a really IQ, but I didn't fit into that system of learning. Like I didn't work with sitting for 6 hours and listening to somebody talk. And so to go from that and then bad grades in college and then finally getting some good grades, but going into corporate world, and I had a layoff, and then I switched companies and then got headhunted, and then finally felt like I was making progress, only to meet like a boss that hated me. And so there was no chance to win, and then getting fired from that job. And talk about like looking back over the course of your life and be like, what the hell was I ever good at? Like trying to find like some trophy on the shelf, you know what I mean? And so I think a lot of us have to walk that path, right? To like really start to, I say it's as important in self-awareness and self-work, like to understand what you love and what brings you joy and what you're good at. But then on the flip side, it's just as important to find out like what doesn't bring you joy and maybe just what you're not that good at. Like those are just as important steps into, so how did that kind of come to a head for you? I'm curious of like where that kind of,
was inch by inch, step by step. So after about 4 years of sucking at sales, I was gaining bit by bit in my experience and in my I guess you could say self-worth, all that type of stuff. And then I moved up to Vancouver and started working with a company called Warrior Sage up there, and did a lot more internal work and facing stuff, and wanted to become a business coach. That's what I wanted to do, a life coach. And getting married, I was with my wife, and I didn't have the money to buy her a ring. And I wanted to get my like first coaching client as a way to pay for it. And so I went and spoke with two of her friends and I said, look, I want to get Callie a wedding ring. I want to do it by coaching. Can I give you like 5 sessions for like $200 or so? I basically like played the pity card.
I used to say after my yoga classes or like after retreats, like when they were donation based, the yoga class, I was like, And if you want to donate for class, like I do have dogs at home, and so you're essentially feeding dogs if you donate to the yoga class. That was like one of my little, yeah. So I know that part.
But they both said yes, and I was shocked. It was like mind blown. Like I couldn't compute that I was actually going to get paid for doing something that I really liked as a business. I coached them both for those 5 sessions, and one other person who took me up on it. 3 people for like $600, and like two of them, they re-signed with me again, and they paid me like $1,500 next time, and their husband signed on. And then my first year, I made like $9,000 as a coach, and I was like over the moon, thrilled with myself.
Yeah.
Just like, I was like, if I can make $9,000, I know I can get to the point where I can make more.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was like from nothing to something, right?
No.
And then didn't hire me out of pity anymore after that. But and then my 3 and second year was like $15,000, and then I came to another make or break moment where I'm like, okay, I have a wife now. I want to have kids with my wife, and now I need to like make this is this going to be part-time or is this going to be full-time?
Yeah. And you know, that's such an interesting moment. Like I remember when I taught my first yoga class, I had to take 2 trains from New Jersey all the way to Brooklyn, and it was all donation based, and it was like in a lady's apartment. I had just been connected to this woman through people I did my training with, and I remember I got paid in like coins, like dollars and coins. Like she literally had like a little drawer, you know, and so like I was getting quarters, you know, but I left that class and I made, after train ticket, an orange juice and a bagel, I netted like $7.80, you know, like American. But I will tell you, I didn't have that first kind of wave of like, you know, but that feeling, right, when you're actually doing something purpose driven and you're doing something you're passionate about, that first like affirmation from the universe, right, is like such a powerful thing. But what people don't realize is like the path to that takes a long time, you know, and it takes a lot of work. And I wanted to touch on something that you said, because the more I am in this space, and the entrepreneur space, and more the conscious entrepreneur space, but you know, all the business books, all the MBAs in the world, it's really, for most people, it's doing what you talked about, that inner work. You know, that's where the messaging becomes clear, and then that's when your purpose becomes clear. And then if you have the confidence and the gumption to stand and do it long enough, right, and wait for that affirmation to come, right, you could be the best marketer, salesperson, right, all those tools and tricks and stuff like that. But I think it's to me, like if people ask me, how did you build your business, it's like the meditation that I do every morning, the breath work that I do every morning. You know what I mean? Like the challenging myself to go deeper within. So I really appreciate that you said that. And I wanted to ask you, so now you have this beautiful wife and you're going to go have kids, and you guys decide to start a business together. Tell me about that.
Oh gosh. Well, okay. So I got to the point where I was doing really awesome. I had like 2 really good years in a row with my coaching. And then right as she's about to have the baby, I lose all of my momentum and all of my desire to want to continue coaching. And I feel like I'm pushing a rope. I'm like, okay, I've done this. I've led a men's adventure group to Peru. I've taken people to the Amazon jungle, and I've done it. And now I don't care. And I'm like, crap, but I've got to keep this going. And right around that time, I like lose all my momentum. And so it freaks her the hell out.
The old found my purpose, now it's not my purpose anymore trick.
Oh gosh. And that was right when she had the baby. And I mean, we had some savings. She had maternity leave up in Canada, which was like a year. But for like 3 or 4 or 5 months, I didn't make like any money right when the baby was born. She got super scared, and she's like a business person too. And she had her own job, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. I don't like, screw him. I'm going to make my own business. And so she decided that she wanted to open a yoga studio up in Vancouver, get one of the franchise locations for Oxygen Yoga. And so she did that, and she was going to do that all on her own without me. And I went to help her the opening week, the grand opening week. So our daughter would have been like a year old at this time. And So I go there, and I've been a sales coach for the last number of years too. So I know sales at this point and know how to sell. And so I go there the first day, and I realize that a yoga studio, to make it work, you need to sell. It's like a gym. Like you have to sell memberships. They don't just sell themselves unless you're out there actively talking to people. And my wife didn't. She had a business and administration background, but not a sales background. And I'm like, this isn't her business. This is my business. Oh shit. So, here I was like not wanting to coach anymore, trying to find something else. And I found it by slipping on a banana peel and seeing that my wife's business was going to be mostly my business. So she, and right about 2 weeks before the yoga studio opened, she got pregnant with our second. And so I end up working like 12 hours a day, 6.5 days a week for the next year, running it and making it successful. And after the first 6 months, we're profiting. We're making like $9,000-$10,000 a month of profit.
Wow,
and
it's pretty good for a yoga studio.
I know. And then the franchise owner, like 6 months after that, she calls me and says, "Hey, do you want to be the trainer for all the new franchises?" So that brought in an extra stream of revenue. And then we started saving up a whole bunch of money, and that was awesome. And I really found more of who I was, even more at that point, being able to I got it. I had it, and all the savings that we had, then we decided that we wanted to move to Costa Rica and do a yoga retreat center.
So that's where you and I connected. And I love retreats so much. It's no secret. I mean, we do a retreat every single month in Southern California. And to the best of my knowledge, there's not many companies, if any. I mean, even like the Tony Robbins of the world, they do one a quarter, you know what I mean? And we're kind of playing at this different pace of doing one every single month. But the reason I'm so passionate is because when, I was stepping into teaching yoga, very similarly, kind of you outlined, like I would teach over 20 classes a week. And that was not including like the drive time, the prepping, the making playlists, and then trying to pick up private clients. And I would undercut everybody. I would charge way less for private. So I was constantly busy, but to survive in New York, I had to do that, right? To make enough money to keep my head above water. And that's only sustainable for so long. I think that's an important chapter of a lot of entrepreneurs' books, right? Where you do have those like, oh my God, I gotta like get this thing going. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's not sustainable. And so, it was actually Costa Rica that called out to me, and I decided to take a trip, but I wasn't planning on going on a retreat. I was planning on just going down and enjoying myself. And then I started telling friends and classes, and all of a sudden people like started getting inquisitive and then offering me money to like teach them some yoga, or like, where are you going to go hiking, or can you just like show us around? You know what I mean? Nothing on the level like of the adventure tours that I think you were talking about, but I was like, okay, I guess I'm like the curator of this. And then it was so funny because a lady walked up to me and she said, "Can you tell me about your yoga retreat?" And that just like hit me. And I was like, I don't even know what the hell that is. And she's like, well, you're like leading one. And so basically the universe was just like, here you go, right in your face. You know what I mean? So the reason I share that story, well, twofold, is one, because I think, you talked about how when you kind of started to do the inner work, right, the opportunities that were meant for you started to arrive, right? You didn't pick a yoga studio, but you picked your partner, obviously, and then this sort of fell into your lap and it was yours to pick up and run with, right? And so again, I think starting from that heart-centered place, that inner awareness place, allows us to start to bring those things into the field, but then understand when they're meant for us, and that's really important. But what I really wanted to ask you about is, you've done a whole different host of things. For me, I feel like retreats are so powerful, stepping people out of their day-to-day, removing their normal environment, the community aspect. But for you personally, like, what do you find to be like the best parts of what it is that you get to do now?
What I get to do now, that would be the reforesting project, believe it or not.
Well, I want to jump to that in a second, but tell me, like, as far as running Tierra De Suenos, like, what's your favorite part about
I
definitely want to talk about that too. But yeah, I want to hear about what you love about the retreat center and retreats in general.
I absolutely love retreats. It's like one of the things that I love to do more than anything. It's the element of, I like to take people to places that they would never other go to themselves and that they don't even know that exist. Like when we saw, like when we saw two jaguars in the wild
Hmm.
in Peru, and we saw them face to face,
Hmm.
and to see the other guys, my favorite part is the audible gasp, like the oh my god, like whole like, or like when they come to our retreat center and they see the big 300-year-old tree in the back,
Hmm.
and I don't even tell them, like we're just walking and they see it and they're like, it's like this stunned, like, oh my, like, holy cow, look at that thing.
Hmm.
Look at that view, or look at this, or look at that. And or when I've taken people to Machu Picchu, when they come around that first corner and they're like, oh my God, look at that. That's probably my most favorite part. And then second to that, it's being able to spend a lot of time with a small group of people and to dive really deep and to get to know each other on an intimate way. Because when you're with somebody for like more than 2 or 3 days, 24/7 at a time, you can't hide yourself anymore.
I always say, like, when people come on retreats, I'm like, just watch, because by the end of, whatever it's 4 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever we do, it's like you will start to become more familiarized, and you yourself will start to become more vulnerable than perhaps you've ever been with anybody in your entire life. And sometimes people are like a little skeptical, and then by the end, it's like the waterworks, the whole, like, the valve is just wide open. And there's such a magic to that. I think that, yeah, I mean, you just said it.
We have groups come here every week, and at the end of every week, they're like laughing and joking, like they're like beaming with energy. It's like the real. I get to see people not when they're in their day-to-day life, when they're outside of that. That's how I see everyone, is when they're outside of that, and when they're like their real selves and just beaming and happy and joyful, and it like crescendos over the week. So I love that too. I love it when they come up to me and say, oh my gosh, your center's so amazing, and we love the food here, and your staff's great, and your wife's fantastic, and love your, like, when they give us those types of things where there's that type of connection and gratitude for what we're doing, and it just happens every week, which is great.
So I gotta ask you, so that civil engineering major, right? That's 22, 23 years old. If I had a chance to talk to him and I said, hey, Jason, do you think you'd have the power to change the world? What do you think you would have said?
I would have said, I know I do conceptually.
Hmm. But would you have really believed it?
No, not at all.
Okay, fast forward. This guy that's sitting in the middle of the jungle, owns his own retreat center, has run a successful yoga studio, has welcomed guests from all over the world, and seen firsthand people make these cosmic shifts. Do you, Jason Westlake, feel like you have the power to change the world?
I've seen it. We've already been doing that. Like between the yoga studio up there and the retreat center we have down here, it's been happening. We've been changing lives. We've seen it firsthand. I've seen people cry at the yoga studio. I've seen people just with their emotions here. And there's relationships and memories and communities that have been built and are here. And whether it's a volunteer that comes in for a month and goes out, who talks with a yoga retreat leader, who talks with guests, and then they go out and have cacao ceremonies, or go out to the beach and go see the Bree tribes and do all that stuff together. It's already here, and I've got a lot of life left too. So.
And tell me a little bit about, speaking of life that you're bringing back into the rainforest, and talk to me a little bit about that project and what it all is and why you're so passionate about it.
When I led my first retreat, we went to Manu Park in Peru, highest biodiversity species in the world. The whole park is protected for conservation purposes. So there's no roads, no people, no business development, no tourists, no nothing in there. Just the scientific researchers that go in there to do that. And so we were able to help out with one of their projects and go in there. And I was a volunteer there for 35 days before taking the group there. It was like being on Pandora in Avatar, like seeing jaguars face to face, the sounds, everything was like, it was just jungle. It was 1 day by car and 2 days by boat to get there. Uh-huh. That's how remote this place is. And so I come out of there, and immediately once you leave the protected area, there's just illegal logging, gold mining, the forests are cut, there's no animals, and it's jarring.
Mm.
It's jarring. And and since that time, I've wanted to help out with conservation in some way. I've wanted to like not just keep what we have, but restore desert, farmlands back into and convert them back into primary rainforest.
Mm.
And and for the last number of years, I've had all my business skill sets that I've learned over the years. I'm like, how can I apply this to that? And so what I did is I created a way where I can acquire farmlands and I can use the farmlands to pay for themselves. So I've gotten into, believe it or not, this is going to sound, I've gotten into commercial farming.
Well, that's a form of engineering, it came full circle a little bit.
I I never, and I've never felt more authentic and on purpose.
Mm.
So I'm using the commercial farming to pay for the land,
Mm.
pay back the initial investment, and to make a profit to buy more land. And after 3 years of doing that, I reforest the land and then buy more pieces of land, and it funds itself at that point.
That's incredible.
I've gone out, I've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars already. Yesterday, we acquired our second piece of farmland. We now have 66 hectares or 159 acres
Wow.
of farmland. We've planted coconut on one. We're about to start planting papaya on the other. And I love it because it brings the rainforest and the ecosystems and the wildlife and the biodiversity back that I got to experience when I was in Manu National Park. It was heaven. It wasn't just paradise. It was heaven. It was, I can't describe it.
Mm.
I can't describe it.
That's incredible. And so in addition to Tierra De Suenos, which I'll add links to where people can find you if they want to come down and visit you guys in Costa Rica, but if somebody wants to find out more or get involved with the reforestation project, what's the best way for them to reach out or get in touch with you?
The main thing I'm looking for right there are, I actually don't need donations. It's more like serious investors who like to invest in green projects because because there's a commercial element, a profit element. There's rates of return. They can contact me by email. Should I?
Yeah, I'll link everything like that. But if there's like what is like the project have a name or something that they can just
Yeah. Sorry, it's restoretherainforest.org. I've got a little rinky-dink website. There's not much information on there. I've mostly just been doing stuff behind the scenes and acquiring farmlands and getting everything set up. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I want to ask you one last thing. So for somebody who's maybe in chapter 1 or 2 of the book, right, to where you and I were, where they're in that stage of maybe it's fire their job, and that kind of stage. If you could sprinkle in a piece or 2 or 3 of advice, what was the most impactful and important things you think that got you from that point A of those really dark night of the soul or dark night of the decade, I guess we'll call it, to present day? What were some of the best things you either learned or that you did for yourself that kind of helped you get there?
There's like probably 2 or 3 different things. The first thing was moving up to Canada and surrounding myself in an environment of personal growth and development with people who saw me more than I saw myself. People that really support, like a really good support network around me for personal growth and development. Number 2, I worked on my internal stuff like pretty much like nonstop because I had I don't know if you'd say broken or messed up or, or so much internal stuff to work through that I just pretty much worked on that nonstop. I was getting coaches and going to events and crying and healing stuff. But at the same time I was doing the inner work, I was also doing the outer work. So I also had massive failures in sales and business, but so it's like the inner work in parallel with the outer work. And if there's somebody who's doing a lot of inner work like me for like a decade and not seeing results, I like to give the parallel to a bamboo tree where the roots are growing underneath the ground for like 4 years and you don't see anything about, like you don't see any result, like not a freaking result above ground.
Yeah.
And it's like watching water boil. If you're at 23 degrees Celsius, even if you're at 70 degrees Celsius and you've made that much improvement, the water's still not boiling.
Yeah, I love that. I say it's like the Amazon.com curse, where it's like we are unfortunately somewhat conditioned to, we can press a button and something shows up at our house, right? And growth and progress, especially when it's on ourself, or especially sometimes in business, it's not that linear sort of, it's not that instant gratification, it's a slow burn, and it takes so many time. There's so many iterations of ways I've structured my business and how I've tried to navigate the landscape of different properties and partnerships and all these different things. So I'm glad that you said that, because it's a patience thing.
When I was in financial service and I went on 100 appointments and I didn't close anything, I always felt.
We had the Mongolian guy, or at least for a day.
I always felt if I do enough work, I'll be able to learn and get better. I just didn't realize how long that was going to take, and how much internal, I guess, despair and hopelessness that I'd have to face. And so I have a really strong sense of will, I guess you would say, or commitment to making something happen. And I will say that you don't have to believe in yourself to make something happen, because there's numerous times where I didn't believe that I could do something. I would do it, I would make it happen, and I still didn't believe that I actually did it.
Just really needed that three-dimensional world affirmation before it was going to become a fully ingrained thing.
No, there would be times where one example, like in my coaching practice, I was like, man, I'll never make like $10,000 a month. And then I remembered, like, oh wait, 3 months ago, if I add that up and that up and that up, oh, that was $10,000.
I just did the same. I told you before we started, like, I switched the venues, and the new place that we're hosting in Southern California, it's amazingly beautiful. I mean, it's spectacular. It's got everything that we could ever need and want, and then some. But I had to go back to the drawing board of like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to charge like our most expensive spot is now less than half of what our least expensive spot is, right? So everything just completely, the cost equation changed. And I changed the whole website. I changed the booking websites, all that. I went to bed, I woke up, and I was trying to meditate with the feeling of it, that it was gonna work. And I don't know if I was 100% there, but I woke up and it was like 2 bookings right away. And I was just like, thank you. Like that, because I needed that physical affirmation, too. So, I love that. I think it's important too, also, to fail forward. I say that a lot to people. It's like, if you're in what you're doing is in your passion space, you'll always it'll help to feel that. It'll help to feel like, even if you're not getting exactly where you want to go, that at least you're doing something you really love, I mean, shouldn't we all aspire to that? Like, if we're going to fail, we might as well fail in a space where we're doing something that's probably our passion and something that we love, rather than somebody else's something or
other. Totally get that. When I was in college at Arizona State in Arizona, when I was 22, if you would have told me that 17 years, 18 years later, that I would be in Costa Rica, in a retreat center and commercial farming, saving the rainforest, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about?
I mean, I say this to people all the time. Like, my favorite teacher is Joe Dispenza, and he says that you should stop trying to figure out how it's going to happen. And he says it's none of your damn business. That's what he says, like, how it's going to happen. And he said, isn't it so boring to try to like figure out how it's going to happen? Like, wouldn't you rather be surprised and shocked by life, right? And rather do it the reverse engineer way, right? Get into the emotion of how you want to feel. Yes, try really hard, but be open to how it'll appear in just the most perfect ways if you get out of your own way and you stop trying to do all the logistics and all the figuring out of it, right? You just stay in that place of passion. You stay in that place of loving what you're doing, and in that presence of just, I love like my life, and in gratitude.
No, when I was in my early 20s, being more of a brainiac, I had read so many self-help books. I knew everything conceptually about how the mind and emotions work. I could explain it to anyone, but in my own life, I saw that I was like eons away from where I needed to be from what I knew conceptually. And so at that point, believe it or not, I kind of stopped reading books, and I'm like, because I'm like, okay, I've got so many of them. And I'm like, I just need to do some action and get this in my body. And I spent years just being an action oriented person.
Yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, Patabi Joy, it would say like it's 99% practice and 1% theory, right? And there's that idea that you need a think box. Like we have this analytical mind, right? We can make plans, we can problem solve. And those are beautiful functions of our brain. But on the other side, like we also need to be able to, feel into our practices and feel into our lives really to understand like what it is that's meant for us and how we're meant to use our energy in the world. And so for me, I've read books and I've tried different things, and I still do the ice bath, the breath work, the meditation, all these different things. But I've kind of like found a system and a way to, kind of put my own little spin on it. And so it's really cool when people come on my retreats. It's like they're, like, oh, well, how do you do this? Or why do you do this? I'm like, because I read enough to know how to sort of do it. And then I got in the play box and I just played around with it. And I saw what, doing this way would kind of change the dynamic of it. Or how did I feel? Even like people ask me, like, should I go vegan? I'm like, I don't know. Like to me, like the ethics and all that, like feel really good. I feel good in my body when I eat that way. But I would never like try to tell somebody, like how to live their lives. I mean, it's not my place. And I would say to them, how do you feel when you eat this? Or how do you feel when you do breath work? Or how do you feel when you do, meditation? So I just think it's really cool to hear a story, again, of such wild transformation from a pretty kind of traditional Western way of thinking, going a very traditional Western college route, all that kind of stuff, going into that cold call sales like environment of like, I gotta like, sell X amount, blah, blah, blah. So now it really feels like, you get to do the things that bring you joy and you're able to monetize at the same time. Is that kind of fair?
Uh, yeah, it actually is that way. I mean, I live here in Costa Rica on the Caribbean. We are we're good financially. We've got multiple different businesses and some other things, and that's good. And get to help people in the community. And I mean, not in our community with like the yoga retreats that come in. And then I have enough time and energy to do my passion project and do this restore the rainforest project, which I still am laughing about, that I feel so authentic and so aligned with it and so on purpose with it more than anything else that I've ever done. It feels so weird for me to say that and to feel that way.
A Canadian rebuilding the rainforest. What are the like? No, seriously, like, what are the chances of that? You know what I mean? No, talk about polar sort of opposites. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, no, you are right. And when people ask, is Costa Rica living down here, is it really as good as people? I'm like, yeah, yeah, it really is. And during the pandemic, about 100 times better, because when everyone else was stuck inside up there or
Yeah.
worrying political stuff, I was just playing with the monkeys and the sloths and going to the beach. And if if somebody says stay in my house, well, that's like 2 acres that backs up onto the jungle, and I can just go bushwhacking and go up and go into the rivers and the creeks and the waterfalls. It's and that's the type of stuff that I love.
Yeah. Well, listen, I so appreciate it. I mean, I knew that our connection was always very kindred and synchronistic. And so I'm glad that we've stayed in touch. And I really hope that your story is inspirational to people. I didn't know all the details of it. And I'm so glad that we got to dig into it a little bit deeper. I feel inspired now. Like I'm just running these retreats. I got to go rebuild a rainforest or something. I got to make a little bigger impact. So, and that's the point of all this. So thank you so much for taking some time. And like I said, there'll be links to everything. If you guys want to follow Jason, if you want to head down to a retreat at Tierra De Suenos. And then also if you want to get involved in his rainforest rebuild. So Jason, thank you so much, man. I appreciate the time.
All right. Awesome.